All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Pilipinx-American Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Alfredo. We here at the podcast want to better understand aspects of Filipinx-American diaspora. We cover topics such as, but are not limited to, history, community, and Filipinx-American culture. So for this episode, it is our last solo episode for season one. Before I go into the topic and everything, I just wanted to say thank y'all for supporting the podcast thus far. It's been a little over a month since this project has launched, and I've been getting a lot of good feedback and everything. I'm excited to bring season two, which is most likely going to be in October. More Some of the planning is already being done right now. Some of the recordings are already being done. So make sure to stay tuned. There will be announcements on my Twitter at PilM Stories, as well as Facebook and Instagram at Pilipinx-American Stories. So make sure to stay tuned on those platforms to see whatever updates are going to be coming in the very near future. And also to go off that, there will be a little bit of a break between season one and season two, but most definitely there will be content coming in the form of writing and such, whatever will be coming to mind and everything. But there will definitely be content that will be popping off as soon as this podcast season is over. But yeah, thank y'all again for supporting this far. So let's get on to the episode. So the topic that I wanted to speak on today is community organizing or community work in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So before I go into it, I'm going to give a little bit of my history and everything. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons, um, what the current situation is like, as well as how people have like adapted to it, mainly from my perspective. So, with my own personal history of community work, I started back in 2010 during or actually no, 2009 during my sophomore year in high school, which is where I got my first taste of student organizing as well as nonprofit work with the community and everything. That was where I got my first exposure to the wider or the greater community of San Diego County and everything. I got to meet a lot of different organizations that were very active during that time. And moving a little bit forward, after I graduated in 2012, I started doing more student organizing in the college space. So I was doing a lot of work with student organizations with the universities and community colleges here in San Diego County. Fast forwarding 2 years later, that's when I took my local organizing to more of a national kind of level. And this was after the NAFA Empowerment Conference in 2014. And that was basically where I had the opportunity to meet different organizers from different spaces throughout the US and everything, and even some from the Philippines as well. So that was when 2014 was essentially when my work as an organizer, as a community worker, expanded from just my little town of San Diego to a wider like range from like outside the state, outside the city, like everything like that. And that's basically how it's been so far. Like ever since 2014, that's been my reality as like an organizer, as a community worker. I've been doing a lot of national work, a lot of community work for the past, I want to say about 11 years now, and it's been like that for a while. So that's a little bit of my personal story of how I got started and how I got to where I am now. So in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, before all of this was going on, a lot of the community work I was doing was mainly in person kind of work. We would do like our meetings at like various community hubs or like boba shops, restaurants, so and so, such and such, all those kind of things. And that was essentially what our normal was, especially since a lot of the organizing I do is very like tight knit. Everyone's very close to each other physically, so it wasn't too much trouble for us to meet in person, but we would also do things like on Google Hangout, and we would also do like Zoom from time to time, but that wasn't the norm and everything. Those would usually be platforms that we would use if schedules wouldn't line up or if we weren't able to physically meet at our like designated location or like a location that we like already set out beforehand and everything. So yeah, Zoom and Google Hangout weren't necessarily the norm unless it was doing like national things. But that wasn't the main thing I was doing for like local. But post COVID-19 pandemic was a bit of a transition because before the stay at home order for San Diego was put into place, I was on a retreat with one of my nonprofits that I'm part of, and I think it was about maybe like an hour or so after or before we ended our retreat. That's when we got the news saying that, oh yeah, there was going to be a stay at home order for, I think it was about 2.5 weeks, but obviously that wasn't true. It's extended way past, I want to say like 6 months or so now, maybe a little over five, and that's basically the reality that we've had to shift to. And shifting from in-person organizing to Zoom, Google Hangout organizing was a very, I would say for me personally, it was a very rough one because of it wasn't the norm for me, and I wasn't constantly using these kind of platforms to organize on. So just having to deal with a new platform was very difficult from my perspective and everything. And yeah, for me, I also experienced Zoom burnout. So for those that don't know what that is, that's basically like having to go from like one Zoom call to another to another to another, like almost back to back, like within a day, like for work, for community organizing, for spending time with loved ones, like going through that like mass amounts of like Zoom calls in a day can easily burn someone out because it's like you're not physically with the person, so the energy is completely different. But that's how like I felt. Like I've experienced Zoom burnout like during the first few months of it, and it was really hard to adjust to this new norm of doing things online. But after a while of just getting used to it and learning how to take breaks in between and just managing my own like mental health, like it got a little easier as time went by. But I don't want to deny the fact or like escape the fact that yeah, it was difficult. And I know that I've had conversation with people in the past saying that yeah, this whole Zoom burnout thing is very, it's just very difficult on like mental health and everything, as well as like the physical body, because it's like yeah, going back, it's not like in-person things. You're not able to share the same kind of energy like you do in person. It's very different, and it's like it's a very hard thing to adjust to, especially if you're doing organizing or community work or just work in general in a space where you're occupied, or like the space is occupied by people and you get to bounce off energies with each other. So yeah, for me the transition was very difficult, but as time went by it became a lot easier to like, I don't know, just handle, because I was able to figure it out along the way. So in terms of struggles, that was like my main thing and everything. To go more onto it before I go into the pros of it. I think struggling is really one struggle is just, I don't know, working with like connection wise and everything. That's more of like a technical thing that could easily be solved, but just one thing that did contribute to Zoom burnout was like internet connection between like different people. Sometimes it'd be kind of choppy, so it's like having like that constant flow of energy or like that Zoom energy interrupted kind of throws me off a little bit. So it's kind of like when the ball's rolling and everything, and then like that flow kind of just gets interrupted. Kind of like how it's kind of weird that I'm bringing this up, but like when Cusco got interrupted like with his like little dancing thing with Emperor's New Groove, and it's like, oh, you threw off my groove and everything, and that's kind of just how like I'm feeling with it, or like how I felt like in terms of that struggle when like it's like that internet connection is like being thrown off and my groove is being thrown off at the same time. It's like, how do I pick up that same kind of energy after like this interruption like ceases and everything? Like, how do we come back from that? So that was like one of the other struggles that I faced while handling like these Zoom calls, Google Hangouts, and everything. Um, but that's basically how it's been for like my cons and everything, is really just adjusting to it and just trying to figure out the whole internet thing. But I want to go more into the pros and everything, and I'm actually gonna touch upon some of these a little bit later. But pros is the fact that organizing on a national level or just organizing in general has become far more accessible for, especially for people who have like a computer and everything or just some kind of internet access. It's been very accessible because again, I don't have to worry about the whole, like I mentioned this in the beginning, like it was used for times when we wouldn't be able to like physically meet or anything because of like time constraints and everything, or just not being able to like make it out to the physical spot. So in a sense, it's kind of like that whole thing of accessibility has become more apparent, and being able to get on these calls like super quick. There's no need for driving or anything, and just the whole accessibility part of it is like amazing because I'm able to organize, have these calls with people like across time zones and everything, and even like across like country or continent lines. It's just the whole Zoom platform, Google Hangout thing is has become very accessible for me personally, and just I don't know. It's like I enjoy the fact that I'm able to do these kinds of things without having to worry about having to buy a plane ticket, or having to buy like or having to like purchase gas to like go to a place or something. And it's just like I could do this in the comfort of my room, or like my living room or whatever. And it's like it's become so much easier to just do this. And going on the whole easy thing per se, is that we're able to carve out more time, or at least that's what I've seen. I'm able to carve out more time with people to be on these Zoom calls and everything. And it's like, oh, okay, so we don't have to plan so much ahead of time. I mean, there is planning before like a Zoom call or Google Hangout begins, but like I could just text someone or just like Facebook message someone. It's like, hey, can we do like this quick little Zoom call? And I'm like, my computer's like right in my room, so I don't have to worry about traveling so much. And just again, going on the whole accessibility thing, just like I could just do this at like a press of a button. Like it's on my phone, it's on my tablet, it's on my computer. Like I have a lot of these things like on me at all times. So if I have to hop on to a Zoom call, it's a lot easier for me to just do it. And it's become like the output of organizing, at least in my personal view, has been, I don't know, there's been a lot more in my personal opinion because of the whole accessibility thing. I keep going back to this, but like I want to emphasize the whole thing with Zoom and everything. Like I'm able to have this kind of access to organize with people like overseas, just across the country and everything. And just it's been I'm gonna I keep emphasizing this, but like I don't know how else to like say it. Like it's just been a lot easier, and this is just a big pro and everything. Like the accessibility of all of it has been great, and like I'm enjoying it so far. And yeah, even just thinking about organizing events on Zoom, it's become a lot more accessible, and it's pretty dope that like community work, event work has transitioned into these Zoom platforms where like if you had like these some of these events in person are were a lot harder to like access in terms of like money and everything. Like people don't have to pay for a venue now, and you're able to have like these concerts, you're able to have these conferences, like these events, these panels that typically you would have to pay money to like just to enter, or even just pay money to get a flight to wherever it's taking place. And now it's just community work has taken like more of a shift because like the whole accessibility of it, like you're able to have these panels, you're able to have these conferences, you're able to have these concerts and fundraising events and all this. And it's such a big pro and everything. I mean, granted, there are people that don't have access to like internet or to computer, which is unfortunate, but like it's becoming this norm, or at least I'm seeing it as this norm, that everyone's may have like this access to the internet and computer. Like in the future, it's like gonna be like the standard. Like I was like having this talk with a friend and everything. Like I kind of believe that with the way things are shifting right now, and just like the need to, I don't know, the need to just like be with each other like online or whatever, like to FaceTime, to just talk, to organize, like the platforms like Zoom, Google Hangout, and just like internet in general is becoming more necessary for us to continue living our lives and everything like that. So yeah, I think I was kind of going on a little bit of a tangent, but just like the pros and everything just goes back to accessibility. And I like the direction that like this is going, because again, like I'm able to organize with people like across the nation, across the country, across like continental like borders and everything. So I think it's like super dope. And just going on to a bit of like how, yeah, just shifting and everything, like, yeah, everyone's going more online, which is really dope. And like I think that everyone has been adopting pretty well. I've personally, like, it took me a little bit to like adopt this kind of format, but it's just been a lot easier to like get into the flow of like Zoom, Google Hangout, just any kind of like online organizing and everything. It's like I've been able to get into the swing of things. I'm able to like know when these calls are gonna happen. Like I could take a little bit of a break beforehand, before like I get into it, and get like right in the right mindset beforehand, and also doing it in the comfort of my own like house. And it's like I wouldn't be able to feel as much comfort as I did compared to this. Yes, there was comfort beforehand, but it's like there's a new level of comfort that I'm getting from like these online things. I don't know what everyone else's kind of opinion on like this whole like Zoom organizing and everything, but I mean this is is kind of transitioning to the whole like advice question section of like the podcast. But my question to y'all is, how, like, for the community organizers out there, how do you see the community shifting? Like, how do you see your work shifting in terms of like these Zoom calls? Because I see it as more, again, I think this is probably the fourth time I'm mentioning it, but the whole accessibility part of it, like we're able to like plan these conferences like from across the country and just bring it to like an online platform. And I'm just seeing more places doing this. Like I even have like my own personal ideas of having like online conferences or just online panels, and it's like it's more accessible and everything. Yeah, there are some things you're gonna have to manage in terms of like housekeeping, but it's like you won't have to spend as much money to like get these people out here, to fly them out, or just even to spend money on a venue. I mean, like the most you'd probably spend on is like whatever the monthly fee for like whatever Zoom's monthly fee is. But if you have like access to like a school account or just like a business account or whatever that allows you to have like longer calls, it's like you don't even have to worry about that as much. And the second, how have you adapted? Like I've said this in the beginning, like it took a while to adapt and adopt this kind of program for myself and just like the people around me, because of like all the Zoom burnout and everything, and just like not being used to having this platform as a norm. Because I know there are some people who may or may have not used like these platforms as their own meeting spaces or just event spaces in general, but it took me a little bit to like get my own mental health and just like flow regulated to the point where, okay, this is the new normal now. How am I going to use this to my advantage? And that took about, yeah, it took about 2 months for me to like fully realize the whole capabilities and everything, and just realizing, going back to the first question, like how is it shifting for you and everything, and like adapting that shift took a little bit of a time. But like now that I have this place of normality with these like platforms, it's a lot easier. And I think the last question that I wanted to address and just like proc some kind of thought is, what does the future look like with these like online platforms? Like I don't know when this pandemic's going to be over and everything, or like I don't know if people are going to go back to whatever like the old normal was, but like with this new shift, like the normal is going to be different. Like what if like people aren't as comfortable yet with flying, at least in the states and everything, or just like comfortable like being in these spaces with like, I don't know, just like a lot of people. And like what does the future look like for that? Is, I don't know, for like community organizers out there, is it gonna look like you're gonna have more online events? Have you been doing way more online events since like the beginning of the pandemic? Have you been having more meetings online? Like how are you adjusting to it? Like what is, it's a very like broad kind of question, but it's like I feel like this question could go either way, and like any answer is correct in this kind of case. Like what does the future look like? Because I have this like theory that most everything is going to be online now, and with like the development of like technology and everything, we might even be at this point where like I don't know if it's gonna be like within the year, like the next year or like 2 years from now, but just I feel like eventually we may be in this like space where organizing nationally through or even internationally like through these kind of like online platform might maybe the norm, and just like where almost like at that point where like we have like holograms for this kind of thing. I mean, like with the whole Tupac hologram that happened at Coachella like years back, like I mean that technology is already there, and it just makes you think like could we do these like online conferences, online concerts, like from the comfort of our homes and everything? Will we be using like these holograms that they use at Coachella to a more like organizing kind of sense? Like who knows? Like this could be an opportunity that a lot of people may want to take up. Like I really don't know what the future looks like. It's more so just like ideas that are just coming in my head, and I'm curious about what everyone else wants to think about these kind of questions. So just reiterating, like, how do you see how is your community organizing or community work shifting through these times? Have you adapted to this new norm of like online work and like during this pandemic and everything? And just most importantly, what does this look like for like the community's future? What does it look like for like our future? What is organizing gonna look like? How is it gonna shift and everything like that? So yeah, just food for thought. If you're like on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, I'd like y'all to like answer these questions and everything, because I'm really curious about what it's gonna look like for people, or what kind of perspective like you've gained since like this pandemic has happened. Like what have you gone through with like your own community work and just work in general? Like how have things changed for you? And I'm curious about like where everyone's perspectives are, and like yeah, again, if like you're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, like I want to see these kinds of like conversations happen and everything. But yeah, that basically concludes episode 9 of the first season of the Pilipinx-American Stories podcast. And with next week coming along, that will be the finale episode of season 1. And again, season 2 will most likely be dropping in October. There's already like a draft going along and everything. Recording is already happening, so the concept is already drafted. So the theme will most likely be out during the last few weeks of September. So make sure to keep an eye on that. Make sure to follow myself on Twitter, Pillam Stories, and Facebook and Instagram at Pilipinx-American Stories for more updates and everything. And again, thank you all for making the first season of the Pilipinx-American Stories podcast a very amazing one. I've gotten a lot of amazing feedback, and I'm excited for the next season and everything. And I'm really hoping that everyone gets like gets something out of like these upcoming stories, as well as the stories that have come through so far. And if you haven't already, make sure to listen to the first 8 episodes of the Pilipinx-American Stories podcast. There have been amazing guests talking about their artistry. We've talked about things like 90 Day Fiance, a lot of narrative series on there, and just a lot of hard to talk about topics that needed to be addressed and everything. So make sure to give those first 8 episodes a listen. And thank you again for tuning in for episode 9 and everything. And we will see you at the finale next week. And I hope thank you again for supporting. And yeah, thank you again for listening to this episode. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks.